Brandon Miracle. On November 21st, 2004, Nintendo said goodbye to the Game Boy line. Goodbye, Game Boy. Goodbye, Game Boy Color. Goodbye, Game Boy Pocket. Goodbye, Game Boy Advance. Goodbye, Game Boy Advance SP. Goodbye, Game Boy Micro. They left it all goodbye. They said goodbye to the warm and comfortable feeling of a brand and introduced the third pillar, otherwise known as Nintendo DS. This console originally wasn't going to be the replacement to the Game Boy, but of course it was going to be. This was a dual-screen device capable of 3D graphics. In fact, the first game they ever demoed on the DS was Metroid Prime Hunters, the very first game we ever saw. Although I'd say, going years on, the DS wasn't really known for 3D. It's mostly more casual 2D games, stuff like Professor Layton, stuff like New Super Mario Bros. However, the prominent launch title was an adaptation of the pioneer of 3D with Super Mario 64 DS. Where were you when this came out, Brandon?
I was probably in elementary school, completely unaware of what a Nintendo DS was, because I had not yet started subscribing to Nintendo Power. I came to the DS train a little bit late, and it's not because I didn't want one. It's because I said, Ma, I want a Nintendo DS. I saved up this money from my birthday and the Christmas and all that stuff. And she's like, you don't want a Nintendo DS. You want a Game Boy Advance SP. And I said, why do I want a Game Boy Advance SP? And she's like, well, because it plays Game Boy games. And I said, Ma, the Nintendo DS plays Game Boy games. But apparently, some goofball at Walmart told her that wasn't true. What I think happened is she said Game Boy games, and he was like, yeah, you're right, it doesn't play Game Boy games. It plays Game Boy Advance games.
What a bozo! What a bozo.
So I came to the DS a little bit late. I don't think I got one until about a year or two later. I got it alongside New Super Mario Bros. So I was behind, but the first game I tried to get after getting my DS was Super Mario 64 DS, because the exciting thing about the DS for me was, like what you said earlier, is that it was, had 3D graphics, and on a handheld, that blew my little mind. Because, the coolest thing about getting a new handheld generation from Nintendo back then was like, what console is this handheld going to catch up to? I remember telling my dad, once I had the money saved up to go get the game, I was like, this is the game I want. And he's like, you already have this game. And I said, no, I don't. This has Luigi in it. It plays Luigi in the original one. We drove to like 4 different Walmarts across 2 cities and could not find this game. We had, I think we were driving around for at least an hour and a half. But eventually I did find like 1 copy at a Walmart. Just finally picked up the game, brought it home, started playing it, and had a blast.
Man, I have a more cynical story, I guess, about this, because I was all on the PSP train in that time. In 2005, I was super into the PSP. It was an MP3 player. You could watch movies on the go with a UMD, put a little disc in, and watch Back to the Future Part 2 anywhere you want. That was rad.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and the PSP, it was playing far more advanced games than the DS could do. Like, DS could do 3D, but it wasn't known for 3D, whereas the PSP had Dexter, it had Metal Gear Acid, had Luminous, which wasn't 3D, but it was cool. It had so many unique games that it made the DS feel small at the time. I was like, the PSP is going to be the future, baby. But then, I think the DS kind of had a second launch with the DS Lite, with like Brain Training and New Super Mario Bros. Because like the original DS was kind of an ugly little thing.
It's not an attractive console.
Yeah, but then the DS Lite came along and really pushed for a more global audience and left the PSP behind in the dust. And when Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass was announced, I was like, oh buddy, I've got to get a DS. So I was looking into more DS games, and I saw Super Mario 64 DS. I was like, hold the phone! This is a 3D game! I thought only the PSP could do 3D games. And so I watched so many videos of this game and saw so many screenshots, and I was like legitimately impressed, because not only was it an N64 game, but it looked better than it in many areas, especially the character models. And so I got my DS I think it was when the DS Lite launched, like a year and a half after the original DS. Which, by the way, the original DS launched in 2004. The Game Boy Advance launched in 2001. There were 3 years that the Game Boy Advance had on the market on its own, which doesn't feel real.
Really short.
Yeah. The Game Boy Advance definitely carried on after 2004, but it doesn't feel like the DS came along that quickly. But anyway, I got Mario 64 DS probably early 2007, and I have mixed feelings on it, because I adore the original Mario 64 in so many ways. As I said earlier, it's the pioneer of 3D movement. And we'll talk about lots of aspects of this game. I've talked about it before in the past. I know people kind of know my feelings. But I can never get past the actual controls. The way I think they intend you to play is by using the thumb strap that came with the original DS and using that on the touchscreen. Because the DS doesn't have an analog stick. It's not like the PSP, which did. You had to use either the D-pad, which has 8 directions programmed in. Even if you're using a 3DS, you're still using 8 directions. Or the touchscreen, which does have 360 directions. But, I feel the worst possible thing you can do with the touchscreen is replicate a controller. If you give me an N64 emulator on Android with Mario 64 and say, go at it, John, I'd say, no! So, doing the same thing with this version on DS, that's not how I want to play the game. I recognize that you can play it that way, and there are mods to make it so you can play with an analog stick, but just by default, I can never deal with the controls that well.
Yeah, this, to skip a few years ahead, when Monster Hunter Tri Ultimate came out on 3DS and Wii U simultaneously, the 3DS version had camera controls mapped to the touchscreen.
Right.
So you were expected to take your right thumb onto the touchscreen and move the camera around. It's just not a great way to experience that. And that's made even worse in Mario 64, where your primary control method is expected to be the touchscreen. I usually anticipate Nintendo to be innovative and smart when it comes to this kind of design, and I don't know, they missed the mark here quite a bit.
You can respect the ambition of taking, the biggest 3D game of that era and putting it on a handheld. It's definitely ambitious. You definitely look at it and say, whoa, this hardware's cool. But was it a fit for the hardware? The Mario Advance series, perfect fit for Game Boy Advance. This would have been a perfect fit for the 3DS, but instead we're kind of stuck with something that doesn't really fit the hardware, which is so rare for Nintendo, because they always make games around their hardware limitations. But instead you've got something that's pushing a bit too far. But in all the other aspects though, this is the perfect hardware showcase, because it shows you the visuals of what DS can do, and it's still one of the best looking DS games. But you've also got download play with that multiplayer mode. You've got a lot of touch features with the mini games and the dual screen with the map. There's a lot of good stuff in here. It's just I don't feel like you can call this the definitive Mario 64 simply because of the way it controls. And it's not even that it's hard to play. It's just it's not very comfortable to play, because you've got to hold down that run button as well, almost all the time.
To compensate for the just the way the system was set up, to give myself analog control, I would hold the L button that sticks the camera behind you all the time. I would just hold it down to keep the camera locked, to give myself more precision. And the big negative with that is that holding down that button, you hear that cranking sound of the camera cranking around constantly. It's awful. So I shouldn't have had to play it like that, but the fact that I came up with some stupid method of making the game control better. Yeah, I mean, yeah, but bottom line is I shouldn't have had to do that.
No. The camera is in some ways better and in some ways worse than the original. Because the original Mario 64, you're often wrestling with the camera. You'll be okay, turn right, and it goes, and then it turns back a little bit, no, go right. And it's and then it goes back again. Whereas this one, you can always, it's like a 360-degree camera. You press the L button and it will always go where you want it to go. However, that's the only real way to easily center it, because turning it right and left is on the touchscreen. So if you actually want to manually turn the camera, you've got to take your hands off the buttons, go to the touchscreen, make sure you're pressing the right place. And so, I think the N64 version is easier to run and change the camera, just to go with the flow. Yeah. But DS somewhat has more flexibility, and also somewhat doesn't.
There's definitely some give and take there. But outside of its clunky controls that, probably don't stand the test of time, there's a lot of stuff that Super Mario 64 DS does that's kind of wacky and cool. It may not all hit, but it's different, and I think that's worth something.
Totally. I mean, right from the start, like first off, you start the game up. You're used to Mario's big face coming up and being able to like move it around. But they immediately play with the DS's features, and instead of just morphing that face, it becomes a little doodle that you can then sort of move around and manipulate in cool ways with the touchscreen. But then you start the game, and you expect just Mario to jump out of that pipe, and for a moment it is just Mario. It pauses, then it pans out, and out come Wario and Luigi as well, here to get that cake. That was such a nuts opening. Bonkers.
They also have a little fun with it too. Like, as they're running towards the castle, they're like bumping into each other and getting angry and just, getting up to antics. It's a very different opening than the original game. And then after they end up inside the castle, the camera zooms up to the top of the castle to a sleeping Yoshi in the exact same spot that you find him at the end of Super Mario 64, which is really cool.
It's the coolest part, to be honest. Like, they play on your expectations so much there, and then you play as like the end game secret of the original, which is rad. And then you go to the castle, and it's locked. You can't get in, and you have to actually explore the hub to find a rabbit who has the key. I don't know how much I love starting a Mario game as Yoshi. I kind of want to just start off as Mario, but it's such a cool way to play on expectations. And it's the first time we've really had a 3D Yoshi. Like, you can flutter jump in 3D, you can use your tongue, you can get eggs, you can throw things. It's kind of like how you'd expect a 3D Yoshi game to play. And we've never really had that outside of, riding him in Mario Sunshine, but it's never been quite like this.
No, it's kind of weird to think about that this is like the one and only instance where this is true.
Yeah.
You could say Super Mario Odyssey with the Yoshi capture is close, but having the full egg throwing mechanic and everything, like, this is a fully realized Yoshi in 3D, and it's never happened again.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to get a little bit critical. You can disagree all you want, Brandon. So,
okay.
You jump into the game. You're Yoshi. You're not Mario. You're not Luigi. You have none of those guys. They're locked away. So, in the original Mario 64, you've got a lot of freedom to what you want to do. Like, you go to Bob on Battlefield, you get your first star, and then you sort of unlock more of the castle. A lot more is given to you at once. However, in the DS version, you're kind of blocked off with a lot of stuff. So, once you've got that first star, you jump back into Bob on Battlefield, and it's like, oh, it's time for Koopa the Quick. And you talk to him, and he goes, oh, I'm waiting for Mario. You're not Mario. And so you've got to leave the level. You've got to get 8 stars to unlock Mario, which is usually the requisite to facing Bowser. So now you've got a lot more of a hurdle, a lot more stars to get, but a lot fewer options. You can't go back to Bob on Battlefield. And so you go to another level, like Womp's Fortress, or whatever else, Jolly Roger Bay, whatever you want to go. But there's certain stars you just can't do, and it feels like you're kind of forced down a path of levels you have to do. There's a lot less freedom. And I kind of feel that throughout the game. Because Wario and Luigi are optional characters. You don't have to get them. But certain stars require them. And that is a thing I don't love about this version of the game, is it kind of takes abilities that were core to Mario in the original Mario 64 and divides them up unnecessarily, in my opinion. Only Mario can wall jump. Only Luigi can do that propeller thingy. Only Wario can get the metal cap. I preferred them all just being central to one character.
It makes the characters feel a little less unique overall. Sure, Wario is like really strong, and Luigi is slippery, and he jumps higher and whatnot. But splitting those core abilities up, I don't like. Having Mario being the only character that can wall jump,
it's weird.
That really sucks, because wall jump is a really core mechanic in that game. There are a lot of stars that expect you to be able to do that. So to not have that on Yoshi, Luigi, and Wario is kind of a blow.
But the wall jump is better here, though, because in Mario 64, when you wall jump, sometimes you just face plant a wall. But I want a wall jump!
Yeah.
Whereas here, it's so much better. So to the game's credit, it does have a better wall jump.
Yeah, it gives you the Super Mario Sunshine version where you slide down the wall and then you can jump off. I think the game kind of shows its own flaws in the fact that in the levels themselves, you can collect caps that transform you into the other characters.
Yeah. But you still have the voice clips of the character that you were. So, like, if Yoshi gets a Mario cap, he still, like, whenever he jumps, he still goes.
I think that's kind of, like, not solving the problem. That's dancing around the issue.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to do that. Like, it's cool that it gives you a preview of some of those characters before you unlock them. I like it from that point of view. But why not then maybe just have all 4 characters playable from the get-go? That would eliminate the linearity problem. That would lessen the significance of needing the separate caps in the stages. But moreover, if you gave all the characters the ability to use all 3 caps, wing, metal, and invisibility, and then maybe gave them some other unique moves, like Yoshi. Like, Yoshi has the whole egg-spitting mechanic, he can spit fire. Like, none of it is particularly useful in any of the game's design, but you can do it, and that makes it interesting in its own way. So I think having less pertinent abilities on these characters would have been more interesting.
Yeah. Like, having them here in the first place isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like, I think it's so cool to play. Look, Luigi is so broken in this game. When you do a backflip...
He breaks the game.
Yeah, he infinitely spins really slowly and for a really far distance. So there's stars like that require the wall jump, like in the first snow level with Mario. But if you're Luigi, you can just backflip off the stage and just kind of fly there instead. And it works for everything. Like, Rainbow Ride is so much more fun with Luigi when you can just ignore everything and fly wherever you want to go.
Or the lone mushroom on Tall Mountain.
Yeah. So there's definitely still a lot of fun to have with these characters. I just wish they didn't segment them so much.
Like, I wonder why there's the decision to split between 4 characters in the first place. Like, yes, it differentiates the game from its original form, gets you other playable characters, but I don't know, it doesn't service the game. I think this design would have been better suited to a follow-up to Super Mario 64 rather than a reimagining.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of ways in which this game also just kind of does brand new things. Because it is the original Mario 64, but there's 30 brand new stars. Every single level has a new star. There used to be 6 plus the 100 coin bonus star in the original. Now there's 7 plus the 100 coin bonus star. And I think most of them usually play around with a specific character ability star. Mm-hmm. So there's new ones in that. But there's also just brand new areas built from the ground up. Some of them are to unlock characters. Like if you're getting Luigi or Mario, you go to a brand new level built for that character. But there's also just random bonus areas everywhere. And in my opinion, I know people like they kind of put this game on a pedestal for its new content. I feel like a lot of it isn't that high quality. like I think they're very comparable to the Bowser stages, where it's just kind of taking these sort of textureless platforms and putting them in quite a bland environment. Like there's one early on which just has Mario Sunshine music playing for some reason, and it's just like a small little round beach, and that's kind of all it is. And then there's another later on where it's just these kind of grey blocks everywhere. I don't particularly hold this content to a high regard.
I think as a kid, it was really cool that there were just new levels at all.
Yeah.
But looking at it objectively now, the levels themselves really aren't all that interesting. But, I don't know. I think you could probably levy that criticism against Super Mario 64 in its entirety.
You probably could. But as I was saying, the Bowser stages are that. None of them have particularly intricate design. It's just kind of like, oh, here's a grey moving platform.
I don't think they're necessarily worse than any of the levels that Mario 64 already has baked in. But with the 8 years of time between the original game, only 8, and
nuts.
this version, I don't know. I would have expected more.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's any worse or any better than any of the other stage designs that are already in the game.
Right. Like I love Mario 64. It is one of my favorite games, but I do think it takes a bit of a dip in its upstairs portion, because
Yeah.
it starts using level themes that have already been used, like another snow level, another sort of grassy level, and certain ones like Rainbow Ride are just kind of like, do I have to do this again? And I think, the DS version kind of makes that stuff more tolerable with Luigi, unintentionally so, but it is. I'd rather play them on DS than the original because of him. But, all in all, I don't think this is a bad game. I think it is an inferior version of what I would choose to play. Like, if you were to give me an N64 controller or a DS to play this game, I would pick up the N64 controller and play with full analog, because it was the 3D pioneer. And I think that's such a huge part of how the game plays and its design. I'll trade all this bonus stuff for that controller. That said, though, there's still value in here.
The biggest value back then was the fact that you're playing Mario 64 on the go. Like, if we're looking through this, through a lens of 2004, this is crazy. Like, the fact that this happened at all is nuts. It's just, it doesn't stand the test of time quite as well as the original game does.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this, though. If they released a version, like on Switch NSO or whatever, that had full analog control with proper camera controls, what would you think of the game then?
It would change a lot. I know there are already unofficial mods to give it full analog, and they are game changers. I feel like the pacing is still stronger in the original. I don't love breaking up the characters. I don't love the new stuff. But it's still it is an interesting way to re-experience a classic, though. So I would love if they did that. If 3D All Stars had 64 and 64 DS, I'd play both. It wouldn't be one or the other. They're two separate experiences. And graphically, it's interesting too, because technically, it's not ahead of the 64 version. Like the polygon count is lower. However, they have made far more on-model characters. Like, Mario is this blocky, circular guy in the original Mario 64, and now he looks like Mario. Bowser looks like Bowser. It is. I think it's a visually more competent game, though there are certain aspects I don't love. I think the off-model nature made some characters like Koopa the Quick feel like an original character. Whereas in the DS version, he's just a darn Koopa. I don't want to race that guy. He's just a big Koopa. And you've also got characters like, King Goomba from Paper Mario is in here. I forgot about that. He's that's how you get Mario. You gotta fight him, and then you fight him as Yoshi. It's like a fight made for Yoshi, where you've got to take the Goombas from behind him and spit them out. That's one of the rare instances where they really do use Yoshi's abilities, and it's cool there. But it's not a very long stage, though. Just kind of, you climb up a pole, and then you fight him. That's kind of it. But there's cool, unique features in here that make it feel distinct from the original. I just don't know how much I value them as a whole compared to the original.
You would likely lose, I should say, all of the mini-games that you can unlock, because you would be forced to play those in handheld mode only if it were to come to Switch. And to actually praise the mini-games a bit here...
Yeah, go ahead.
A lot of them are really good.
They're great.
Like, they utilize the touchscreen in really interesting ways. Like, you have the snowball one where you're, like, running down a track and you have to avoid rocks and stuff. There's the one where you're launching bob-bombs into the sky to protect your flowers in the castle grounds.
Yeah, like sorting bob-bombs. You've got... You'll see so many cool mini-games in there. And then you can gamble with Luigi. The best part.
I told you this in our chat, but the poker mini-game with Luigi, I played it so much, I hit the maximum coin count, which was like 9,999, I want to say. Like, it's fun. Like, those mini-games are worth playing. I think the way you unlock them is kind of unfortunate, because, like, you have to be the correct character in the castle. That makes... So your characters each have a selection of mini-games that you can unlock. When you're playing as that character in the castle, rabbits for that character spawn all over the place, and catching them will give you their mini-games. But you have to be that character, otherwise their rabbits don't spawn. So it's kind of annoying to have to switch between all 4 characters, run all over the castle, like everywhere, to collect all the bunnies. But it is worth it in the end for all those mini games that you can play.
It's very funny because the original game had 1 bunny that you can catch twice to get 2 stars. This game, I don't know how many bunnies it has, but there's bunnies everywhere now.
I'm the resident bunny guy,
Yeah.
and I think there's too many bunnies.
Even he thinks there's too many bunnies. There's 36 mini games in total, and honestly, you could have just sold this game with these mini games, and I'll be praising it. I think even if there are aspects of the main game I don't like, these mini games are so solid. They use the touchscreen in such a cool way. Like if this were a launch, and it was a launch title, but if you were to launch it with just this, it would be praised for how it uses the DS's hardware. It was so good that New Super Mario Bros. Just stole a bunch of them for both the single-player and multiplayer stuff. But yeah, and also, we haven't spoken about this too much, but there's also the multiplayer aspect as well, where you can have 4 people all together. You can use download play, which was another cool feature. Like back on the Game Boy Advance, you either had to link up with a big cable, or you can get the wireless adapter that Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green had. But now every DS comes built in with wireless functionality, no add-ons, and you can just download with 1 cartridge for 4 different people. And you could run around an arena with 4 different Yoshis. You could change into Mario, Luigi, Wario with the caps, and you just go around just fighting for stars. Yeah, New Super Mario Bros. Again kind of took the same idea, but for a launch title, what more could you ask for? You've got a whole featured game, a bunch of mini games, a competitive multiplayer that uses download play. Like, it used everything the DS could possibly do. And not only that, when you close the console to put it in standby, which again, another new feature, Mario would go... What kind of noise would he make, Brandon? Do you remember what he said?
Bye-bye!
That's what he said, yeah. So, like, there's so many good aspects of Super Mario 64 DS. Like, even if I am soured on some parts of it, I can still appreciate, like, all the good it does.
When you reminded me of that versus multiplayer mode that I barely ever got to play, by the way. I think at most I played it with 1 other person 1 time. Bring it to NSO so I can experience that, please.
Yeah. They should make standalone games for that, for Mario Brothers Arcade, like the one on Mario Advance. Just make that its own standalone game. I'd buy those in an instant.
Easy. But the fact that mode was there, it kind of... I don't want to say it soured me. Like, it made me wish that a fully 4-player Mario 64 had been realized with the DS, because that would have given a great reason to have 4 characters, and would have realized the multiplayer that they originally wanted Super Mario 64 to have. That would have been awesome.
Yeah. I mean, Ella's real, at least, so we can appreciate that, but it would have been so cool to bring that idea back. They got to do that with Luigi's Mansion. They finally got 3D on that game on 3DS. So it's cool when they can take games that have been out for a while and fully give them the ideas they were meant to have in the first place. But yeah, unfortunately not here. But still, like, you can fully understand why people love this game so much. Like, if you ever criticize this game, you usually get a fair amount of people who get kind of angry about that. And I can get why. It's a childhood favorite. If you look back on everything it did at its time, it was a game changer. We were going from the Game Boy Advance, which primarily had 2D games. There were a few ambitious 3D games, but they were nothing like this. This was 3D on the go. It was Mario 64, one of the biggest games of all time, in the palm of your hands, with a touchscreen, with dual screens, with mini games. Like, it's packed, it's filled to the brim. There's so much in here. And then it also has its own unique identity with new characters, new levels. I can understand why people love it so much. It's just, there's parts I just don't love myself.
This is also probably a lot of people's introduction to Super Mario 64. Like, when they think of that game, this is the game that comes to mind. And you certainly can't undermine that for folks. Like, Super Mario 64 is special for people no matter how they played it the first time, whether it be the original or this version. So, yeah, there's a lot of value in that on its own. Like, even as a kid, and, you know, it's been 15 plus years since I've played through it, but back then I loved it. You know, playing it again was just good for me in a new way. Even if a lot of those new features weren't the best, or some of the changes in controls weren't great, like, still a good game at its core.
Yeah. You made me very curious just now. I was just Googling what the sales numbers were for the original. So Super Mario 64 on N64 sold 11.91 million units. Mario 64 DS sold 11.06 million units, which is a bit lower.
Kidding.
A bit lower, but pretty much the same. So it is fair to say that a substantial amount, like, I wouldn't say half because this game's been re-released so much, but a substantial amount of people who played Mario 64 came from the DS version.
Yeah, that is not an insignificant amount.
Yeah.
The fact that it's in the same number of millions is kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, this was the 10th best-selling DS game overall. New Super Mario Bros. Was number 1. That was 30.80 million. So, like, 3 times the amount. But still, for a launch title, 11 million's crazy. And yeah, what a showcase for the DS. A really cool game, but not necessarily one that, I don't think it dethrones the original. Where do you land on that, Brandon, though? Like, would you, if I were to give you a cartridge of the original and DS, which would you take?
I would take the original.
Okay.
Like, the way Mario feels and controls in that original game is way more precious to me than being able to play as the other 3 characters, the 30 more stars. That said, if you were to give me Super Mario 64 versus 36 touchscreen minigames, then we might be talking.
That's the real story. It's also cool, like, when you reflect on cartridge size, because I think it says we'll be 8 years on from the 64?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was the N64 cartridge. This is the DS cartridge. Look at that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, they squeezed it down and they added more stuff. How's that possible? I don't know.
The 64 cartridge is only slightly smaller than the original Nintendo DS.
All right, I think we're probably about done here. We'll let one live chat comment give our closing thoughts. So just keep typing away, everyone. We'll read a random comment, and that's how we'll close this off. Okay, we'll use Vedran. Vedran says, still weird that Wario was there. It is, because like, Wario's never really been part of main Mario. Like in Mario Land 2, he was the villain, but he was just kind of span off from there.
He's also, like, arguably the worst playing character in the game. Like, there's no reason you should ever be Wario in 64 DS.
Why was he invited to the castle? Like, the last time Peach... or Mario acknowledged this guy was when they were fighting each other to save Mario Land. And now he's invited to the castle? I don't buy that. No way.
Something doesn't add up here.
No. We're calling shenanigans here. But we are wrapping up now. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. If you love Mario 64 DS, we don't want to harm you. In fact, we're with you in many areas. I think Brandon even likes this game a significant amount. So,
I do.
Yeah. So, yeah, your thoughts are valid. We appreciate you. It's a cool game. It's just not necessarily one that I hold above the original. But thank you for tuning in. And if you enjoyed this, you can join the people watching it live for future discussions by joining our Patreon on patreon.com/GVGaming, where we post all of our videos early for everyone to watch. We also host discussions live, just like this one. So you can watch all the bloopers before any edits come in. You can see all the dirty stuff that happens behind the scenes. So yeah, consider becoming a patron, and we appreciate you all, even if you don't support us on Patreon. But thanks, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
Bye. Let's close our DS's.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.